Here I want to share with you the tools of concept artists that will help you to create your dream design, one that truly evokes emotions. I'm Evstratiy and I'm a professional concept artist in the gaming industry, and I've worked with Riot, Valve and Marvel. Alright, any design begins with an idea. And you ask, how do you know if a design is good? Well, a good design is one that effectively fulfills its function and solves the problem, whether it is set by the project team or the personal goal of the artist. If you are creating a design for a project, you probably already have a task with a description. But what to do if you want to make design for yourself and you have no ideas? In this case, you can do what I sometimes do, which is to make an inspiration from another artist's work and draw something similar. Or get inspired by a game or a movie and make your own character for that project. Or even better, make your own. So, I created a project called Gold Rush, a fictional Wild West world during a gold rush era where gold spreads like a mold, causing various mutations. My inspirations were games like Bloodborne and Evil Within. I would also like to mention other ways to generate ideas that might help you. Let's explore several methods. Visual mix. This technique involves combining different objects, creatures, or elements to create new and unique designs. For example, what happens if you combine a motorcycle suit, a German helmet and a skull? That's right, you get Darth Vader. And what if you combine a spider and a tank? That's right, a spider tank. Or a sports car and knight's armor. You get that right. What if? Explore unconventional scenarios and assumptions by asking yourself, what if? For example, what if the Wild West was in space? Examples, Cowboy Bebop and Firefly. What if cordyceps would infect people? That's right, The Last of Us. Reverse approach. Instead of adding elements or combining them, ask yourself, what would change if something were removed? What would happen if humanity's reproductive capacity was taken away? Scale experiments. Changing the scale of everyday objects or creatures. What would happen if humanity had to survive among giant people who want to eat them, or if it were possible to shrink to the size of an ant? You get the idea. Influence of environment. Consider how the environment can affect a character or setting. Genre fusion. Choose two genres, styles or setting and combine them. For example, combining steampunk and fantasy, or combining post-apocalyptic and dark fantasy. Anachronisms. Take a historical period and add elements to it that clearly do not belong there. Or imagine what would happen if technology took an alternative path of development. These are good examples. Great, now we have an assignment. What's next? Basically, you can start sketching, especially if you are already familiar with the theme and setting of your design. However, the theme and setting are new to you, or you don't have a very good memory. Important stage will be gathering references. I categorize references into three types. Mood board. These are the materials that can serve you as inspiration, convey a certain mood or set a style. General. These materials that can serve as your starting point when working specifically on a character, from historical photos to existing designs by other artists or from games and movies. Supportive. These are the ones that help you in understanding and drawing the constructions or specific objects, clothing elements or mechanisms. Alright, Mr. Smarty Pants. How can we achieve good design? Well, after we defined what good design is, we have come up with an idea, found the references, we move directly to the design. In most cases, the design of a character and not only starts with a silhouette, proportions and scale. This is where all magic happens and where most challenges arise. When ranked by importance in the design, these elements are usually the first things viewers notice and interpret. Next comes the upper body, especially the head and face. Then the design elements like shape language, gears, weapons, clothing, armor, etc. Lastly, color, textures and patterns come into play. Again, keep in mind that while this is generally the case, there are exceptions. The good example here is the Stormtroopers from Star Wars. I guess in their case, the order would probably be this. Now let's understand what we mean by silhouette, proportions and scale, and how to work with them. Here is a breakdown. Silhouette. This is the character's contour or general shape, influenced by proportions, outfit and equipment, any tools or weapons they use, their hairstyle or head covering, and of course, posture. Proportions: the relationship of sizes and shapes of different parts of an object one to another. Scale: the ratio of a character's size to a normal human. Sometimes you can express scale through the size of the head or non-real-life objects. Let's look at some iconic and recognizable designs. Among those I can recall, the most famous and memorable for their silhouette and proportions are the K-47 and Vespa scooters. Even if we fill them with a solid color, their designs remain identifiable. When it comes to the characters, most of us can easily recognize who is behind each silhouette. I believe these guys no need introduction. And here are some great examples from games. We can't overlook the iconic designs from Team Fortress 2 and of course the equally important examples from Overwatch. Of course, in real life, silhouette and proportions can't have such wide variety. Or can they? This is a famous shoot by photographer Howard Schultz, featuring athletes from various sports. As you can see, even in real life, people vary greatly in size and proportions. And do you know where in real life silhouette play a crucial role and sometimes receive a special attention? In fashion design. Sometimes it's purely for aesthetic purposes and sometimes for functionality. Moreover, silhouettes play an almost primary role in hair design. But how does all this work in practice? Let's break it down with a simple example. Almost any object can be divided into logical parts, and as we know, proportions are the relationship between the sizes and shapes of different parts of an object. And just by playing with them, we can already get completely different designs. The magic is that even within the same proportions, by changing the silhouette, we can also achieve completely different designs. Now, imagine the variety we can create by working with both proportions and silhouette simultaneously, and then adding shapes, colors, and materials. When we are talking about characters, this is very important to realize that they can have pronounced or, on the contrary, less pronounced personality. And going back to the same stormtroopers, they have almost completely no personality. But on contrary, you know who has a lot of it? That's right, Han Solo. So just as with silhouette and proportion, it depends on the specific goal you have for the character. The ranking of importance looks like this. Facial features and emotions. These attributes are the most direct indicators of a character's emotional state and intentions, so they are at the top of the ranking. In general, the face is a quite powerful tool. Not for nothing they say, the eyes are the windows to the soul. And even if you want to give a personality to a robot, just give it a face. Next up are pose and body language, which can tell you about character's personality, mood, and even the backstory. For example, a specific grip on a gun, glasses pulled down on the nose. In general, when creating a character, it is recommended to think about his animation, how he will live in the frame, and how he moves. Outfit and equipment. These elements help you to define the social status, profession, hobbies, and belonging to a culture or a subgroup. Also, the absence of certain elements of clothing can also tell a story. Hair and facial vegetation. It is simple here. They can say a lot about characters' personality and lifestyle, and can also be used to express their individuality. Feature traits. Scars, tattoos, prosthetics, etc. These elements can tell a character's unique story, their past, or even their accomplishments and losses. I would also include bandages, band-aids, patches, digs, and other signs of interaction with the world and character's conditions. Color palette. The use of certain colors can carry an emotional load and suggest a psychological state or belonging to a certain group or ideology. Well, or simply about presence or absence of a taste. And what's really fascinating is how we can play with attributes and shift their priorities, making one trait or several more dominant. Here, we are talking about priorities in terms of their influence on their personality. Let's look at some examples to see how it works. Here, we see a strong dominance of the face and emotions, followed by clothing and color. In this case, I think that the pose is responsible for the personality. Then clothes and accessories, then vegetation on the head, and then everything else. Here, the loudest narrator is, of course, outfit and equipment. The only thing that will tell us about these characters is probably their hairstyles, followed by clothing and pose. Obviously, these examples are dominated by features such as prosthetics and tattoos. Colors, of course. Then there is clothing and accessories, and then there is someone's face and someone's pose. And you probably already want to ask, how to understand how prioritize? This takes us back to the topic of the idea and description. To truly understand what you need, your character's backstory and personality must be clearly defined. And if we go back to the Stormtroopers and Han Solo again, we realize that this is a faceless enemy, a soldier, one of many. And this is a famous smuggler with a charisma and charm. Well, it is time to talk about outfit and equipment. As we know from silhouette and proportions topic, outfit and equipment are important for shaping the silhouette, which is the foundation of a character design. While they serve a common purpose, proportion and pose mainly determine the physical parameters of a character. At the same time, outfit and equipment play a key role in expressing who the character is. And that is why I try to categorize them and think of it as a silhouette within silhouette. When working with outfit and equipment, I focus on two things: body exposure and iconography. Body exposure, let's go in order with this one. It is simple. Body exposure is not only how much of the character is open or closed, but also what parts of the body are exposed. An exposed body can serve both an aesthetic and practical function. And in different contexts, the same exposed parts of the body can give us different information about the character. For instance, a naked person in a locker room is normal. But a naked person in the street, let's say there is definitely something about that character. Iconography. Now, here is where it gets a little more complicated. Generally speaking, iconography is primarily related to history and culture in art. But the principles of iconography are also useful when working with character design. Let's break down what it is. You've probably seen images like this. Notice how easily it is to read well-known characters into these figures, although there are no details, shapes, or even faces. Thus, iconography activates in our consciousness ready-made symbols and images from the cultural code. Even an ordinary guy in a simple clothes can turn into a cowboy, with the addition of a couple of key attributes, and into a pirate, with the addition of others. Or a girl from a socialite lady can turn into a special agent. Types of clothes and their cut are also closely connected with visual stereotypes and cultural symbols that we unconsciously attribute to certain types, subcultures, or professions. And we can and should capitalize on that. For example, a simple guy in the street clothes with a gun becomes a gangster, but adding a bulletproof vest makes him a mercenary. And by adding a few minor changes, he turns into a PMC contractor. Literally changing his hair and shirt, he becomes security guard or a soldier. Going back to this guy and changing a couple elements, we can make him a war correspondent or a police officer. Or from a bodyguard to a robber. How about that, huh? In addition, we can change the personality or even essence of the character. For example, it's just some special agent. Let's try to make him cool or mysterious. These examples are of course simplified for clarity. There may not always be a need or opportunity to act directly. However, understanding this opens up more subtle ways to create characters whose appearance accurately reflects who they are. And the best part is that this principle applies as much to real clothes as it does to fictional ones. Here is an example of my work, where the girl's outfit is basically a black suit, which is responsible for sci-fi, leather jacket, belts and colors, which are responsible for punk and rock and roll, and from elements, it's bags and weapons that are responsible for robbery. The rest is just design elements and details. Just like clothing, different types of shoes are associated with different archetypes, subcultures, or professions. Notice how different the characters and plasticity of each type of shoe is. In addition to the social and functional role, footwear can also make the character more heavy and squat, or on the contrary, dynamic and light. Also, on the example of fonts, we can see how apparently insignificant details can change the overall feeling of design, making the letter more refined. By the way, it doesn't only work with shoes. Okay, in the conclusion, I would like to say that the principles we discussed are universal regardless of style or setting. The primary distinction I would highlight is between grounded and entertainment designs. Entertainment design, common in games, usually focuses on being engaging rather than practical, often embracing stylization and exaggeration. The film industry, on the other hand, gravitates towards realism, favoring more conservative and functional designs due to the physical realities of film production. Of course, there are intersections, like animation in films and realistic projects in gaming. If you want to follow my art or have any questions, you can follow me on social media. And thanks for watching. Bye, guys.
Hey, if you enjoyed this demo, there's now a way for you to practice thanks to our new timer tool. Just go to proko.com/timer, select a model pack, adjust the settings, and start practicing. The timer tool is free to use with our sample packs and works with any model pack that you own on Proko. Happy drawing, and see you in the next one.